Hi, everybody. We're making sure everything is all set. It's going to happen.
Okay, we're good to go.
Yep. All right.
Marhaba and welcome back to all of our viewers, wherever you may be tuning in from. I'm MK Smith.
And I'm Bassam Haddad.
It is our pleasure to co host the second part of the first episode of the Arab Studies Institute's new initiative, Live with ASI. For those of you who are still unfamiliar with ASI and the work that we do, we are comprised of multiple projects, including the peer reviewed Arab Studies Journal, Tadween Publishing House, our online magazine, Jadaliya, our Status Al Wada podcast, and the newest member of our proverbial family, the Middle East Studies Pedagogy Initiative, or MESPI.
And here's what we're going to start with today. It's Dunya, Egypt, which is our next theme.
Amar Adli, co editor of the Egypt page, recently published a book with Stanford titled Cleft Capitalism: The Social Origins of Failed Market Making in Egypt, which you can find in this episode's post.
This same book by Amr Adli was reviewed and, of course, published in Jadaliya by Hisham Shafiq. He analyzes Adli's approach to the question, why does market based development work in some societies and fail in others? Even though the book's findings are culturally and historically specific, the common histories of post colonial states in the global south make it possible to draw conclusions that apply in numerous contexts.
And as a reminder, MESPI recently published Joel Bainin's Essential Readings post on Marxism and the Left in Egypt. For more new text out nows or essential readings lists, visit mespi.org.
And our next theme is Iran.
In a piece titled Who Translated Franz Fanon's the Wretched of the Earth into Persian, Jadaliya's Iran page co editor, Iskander Sadeghi Bujerdi, finds strong evidence that the Islamic Republic of Iran's first president, Abul Hassan Benesadr, translated Fanon's anti colonial monograph a decade before the 1979 revolution, rather than Ali Shariati, who is widely regarded as the author. Sadeghi finds that Benisadr's name was erased as a translator after the end of his tenure as president in 1981 due to his disagreements with the leadership of the new state.
We also have a great book review for you. In Tehrangeles Dreaming. Tehrangeles Dreaming is the title, and the subtitle is Intimacy and Imagination in Southern California's Iranian Pop Music. In this book or review, Farzaneh Hemasi contrasts the upbeat Iranian pop music in Tehrangeles in the late 1980s and early 1990s to the more somber music produced in Iran during the Iran Iraq War, kind of understandably. In her review of Tehrangeles Dreaming, Aida Yalzadeh praises Hemasi for attending to the often overlooked, or as our scriptwriter decided to write, oft overlooked, because it probably sounds more refined.
It does. It does.
Oft overlooked.
Thank you, Mohammed.
Thanks, Muhammad.
Yes.
Aida Yalzadeh praises Hemasi for attending the oft overlooked politics of pop culture, yet suggests that her argument could have benefited from attention to the influences of music in the US on the Iranian pop music scene.
Also, be sure to take a look at this episode's post, where you can find the second installment of Status Awada's series on on Iranian feminism and revolution titled 1979 Generation, where Shahla Talebi speaks on political prisoners and proletarian feminism. And also check out Mesfi's Essential Readings on Iranian Socialism and Communism by Iskander Sadeghi.
Uh, can you pronounce Iskandar's name again on camera? Do you mind?
Iskander Sadeghi Borjerdi.
Burojedi.
Bor-
Iskandar, since you're
I'm
part
so
of the
sorry.
Iran
I'm so
page
sorry.
co-editors, can you try to change your last name because we're having trouble? Other people have had trouble, and it's much easier for us to learn it, for you to change it than for us to learn it. So yeah. Okay. I conducted an interview with the authors of the recent roundtable titled Is Abolition Global? Iran, Iranians, and Prison Politics, in which the authors address their arguments and why they embarked on the project. Here's what they have to say, though the longer interview will be published on Status Al Wada at statushour.com later on. So we will go to the Iran interview, which is about 12 minutes or
Mhm.
so, and then we'll resume. Am I supposed to play it?
Or maybe people just want to look at us for maybe 5 seconds more. Okay.
So let's get right to it. In the roundtable, you all speak about incarceration not only in Iran, but also of Iranians abroad. And I'd like Omi to speak on that, on the linkages between the two contexts. But before we do so, I'd like to ask Navid and Golnar to say a little bit about incarceration in Iran, how you think about incarceration in general, and how you think about it in Iran in particular.
Sure. Navid, should I start?
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you all for being here and for having us on the roundtable, Bassam. The idea for the roundtable came together because we all work on prisons and incarceration, and the way that my particular work is historical. I'm a historian, and I'm working on a project on a book on the history of prisons and incarceration in modern Iran. So my interest in the topic and my the way that I approach it has to do, it comes from a place where from a early time in my life, I knew people who had been incarcerated in Iran. It's a personal project for me. And I don't always, say that as I go, but I think that for a lot of us on this roundtable, that we have connections to people who've been incarcerated. So part of my own thinking comes from that. But historically, what I'm interested in is the transformation of Iran into what I call a carceral society. What do I mean by that? I mean that Iran becomes, really in the early Pahlavi era, a modern state that approaches and solves the issues of several different sort of social issues through new systems of police surveillance, policing, and incarceration. So the idea of citizenship starts to be formed through the idea of having people who are good citizens on the outside and bad criminals or security threats on the inside, right? So this kind of idea of an inside and an outside, of a line between the healthy, safe polity and the socially deviant or degenerate, and the idea that you can actually cure that sort of social deviancy through carceral methods. That comes to be a really important part of the Pahlavi state. So a big part of the book that I'm writing is actually about Pahlavi Iran, because that's when this, enormous sort of institutions of policing and prisons get founded. But the idea that you can solve problems like sexual deviancy or drug use or border crossing or any number of other things that the modern states thinks of as problems through policing and incarceration. So that's what I mean when I say Iran becomes a carceral society. And people have to deal with that. They have to understand how not to get arrested when they go out in the world. So one of the things I always say is that what it means to be modern in Iran, in the United States, and in Australia is that we're all going around all the time trying not to get arrested. We know what things might make us vulnerable to policing, and we try to avoid those things. But some of us can't avoid those things based on issues of social difference, race, gender, class, etc. So that's also a part of the carceral process.
You said border crossings, and I'm wondering if I could actually interrupt the flow that I first introduced and ask Omid to speak a bit about that, because in the roundtable, he specifically talks about his understanding of incarceration as a bordering practice. So I'm wondering, Omid, if you could kind of pick up from there and speak about the linkages between talking about incarceration in Iran and how you talk about incarceration and think about incarceration in your work.
Definitely. Thanks very much. This whole experience has been wonderful. And like Bassam was explaining to us earlier, I've learned so much from the research of my colleagues as well. It's helped me think about border crossing, bordering practices. It's helped me think about immigration detention, and particularly its relationship with the prison industrial complex, the similarities, the differences, and the continuities. So essentially, my interest in this area came from a number of different fields and a number of different areas of study, but in particular, how Australia, as an outpost of the British Empire, was set up as a penal colony, and how this particular kind of experience, this particular kind of invasion and dispossession of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander lands in Australia ended up multiplying, replicating, morphing into different kinds of carceral sites. So very quickly we saw Indigenous peoples taken from their homelands, put into different kinds of carceral sites, different forms of containment. So missions, reserves, cattle stations, different forms of forced labor, essentially slavery. Australia also used islands off its coast as prison sites, as carceral sites for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. We see this changing forms, manifesting in different ways throughout Australia's history, modern history. So during the Second World War, for instance, First and Second World War, Australia detained indefinitely Japanese, Germans, including German Jews, Italians, people that they saw as being a threat to national security, people that they associated with fascism in Europe or in other parts of the world. So essentially, this history of creating prisons, multiplying prisons, creating new technologies, I refer to these not just as carceral technologies, but as bordering practices, because they're associated with so many other things that happen in Australian culture and society and politics. So here, when I think about immigration detention, it's important to identify that in 1992, the Labor government in Australia, so not even the Conservative Party, the Labor government actually began mandatory indefinite detention. And that involved setting up detention centers, putting a lot of money, subcontracting a lot of companies to manage them. And a large number of the people who detained, people who were crossing borders, coming by boat from Indonesia, first going to Indonesia, then trying to seek asylum in Australia by boat, many of these were from Iran. In fact, the number of people coming from Iran seeking asylum in Australia increased dramatically in 2009 in the post-election, after the post-election uprisings. So essentially here I'm trying to give a very brief history of Australia, its relationship to bordering practices, incarceration, and how prisons are linked with immigration detention and border politics.
And so off of that, can I actually ask a question of Naveed, which is, once we start to think about borders, we start to think about these kinds of problems in a global context. And one of the themes that's addressed in your roundtable is abolition and abolitionism. And you all start kind of thinking through the prospect of understanding abolition and abolitionism as not just a US-centric phenomenon or movement, but something that can also have a certain kind of purchase and political power abroad, beyond the borders of the territorial United States. So I'm wondering, Navid, if you could speak a bit about how you understand abolitionism and how you think about it in relation to your research on Iran.
Right, thank you. So my my own research and how I've become informed about what might be an abolitionist tendency within the history of modern Iran is very much in corresponds to how Golnar understands modernity as basically a condition where you're evading arrest. And throughout the history of modern Iran, beginning during in the Pahlavi dynasty, there was many ways in which people were devising and crafting ways of resisting arrest or evading censors. And they were doing so through in ways of trying to voice and enact practices of defense against what was effectively a carceral state. So in that context, in the absence of, say, a word that corresponds directly or is a transliteration or translation of abolition, it's through my own, local sort of, in a sense, in the United States, my own learning about abolition here, that I have a concept or a category that I can apply as a heuristic to try to organize and understand these kinds of movements in a way that corresponds to or is analogous or runs parallel with histories of resistance against the carceral state here. So, and in that way, I think that we can write and think about the history of Iran and try to see and perceive abolitionist tendencies or practices, even if, as of yet, there isn't an explicit solidarity, so explicit of an organized solidarity within these two contexts.
So while we were doing the roundtable, some events actually took place in Iran where 3 young protesters from the November protests against the fuel hikes in Iran were given a death sentence. And then there was a viral international kind of solidarity campaign with the hashtag Edam Nakonid, do not execute, that effectively delayed, at least for the moment, the death sentence. So I'm wondering if you could each, just to wrap up, speak a bit, perhaps we can come back to you, Golnar, speak a bit, and then to Omid, if you could speak just a bit about this movement, the status of these political prisoners, and how you understand it in relation to your work as scholar activists of abolition.
Yeah, for me, this is a remarkable, again, I speak as if I put on my sort of historian hat, and it's a remarkable instance of something that is a long-standing phenomenon. The first time that the Iranian state mitigated sentences against Iranians due to global pressure from activists around the world was in the 1960s. And that continued in the 70s and forward, that kind of, spearheaded by expatriate Iranians and by, in many cases, exiled Iranians, but picked up in solidarity by different kinds of movements, right? And that has produced sometimes strange bedfellows, people calling for actually kind of different things, but able to agree on the importance of certain kind of flashpoint cases that show us the issues that are kind of globally resonating. And anti-death penalty work is one of those things. Prisoner of conscience work is another one of those things. In my own work, I try to push on that. I'm extremely sympathetic to those calls and have joined in them as well. I try to push, though, and say that we need to be more capacious about what we mean by political prisoners. What do I mean by that? What I argue and what I believe is that the process by which the overwhelming majority of those who are in Iranian prisons and have been incarcerated in Iran from the 20th into the 21st century, they're not incarcerated on so-called political offenses. Iran, the state itself, delineates between political prisoners on the one hand, who they call security prisoners, and ordinary prisoners on the other. But political prisoners who get a sort of outsized voice are a small percentage of the prison population, the majority of which has always been on minor drug offenses. So how do drug offenses come to be carceralized? That's a political process. How do we think about sex work? That's a political process. Why are Afghan refugees held, captured at the border and held in border camps the way that we have similar sort of refugee camps here in the US or in Australia? That's a political process. And we have to think capaciously about connecting these movements. I think in Iran, although there isn't an abolitionist, the abolitionist framework isn't Iranian. And I struggle all the time with thinking like, okay, what is the line between a kind of solidarity in language and movements and wanting to actually have sort of localized understandings driving those movements, right? But there are actually really important movements in Iran trying to bring, for instance, public health understanding into prison reform along public health lines. Trying to, because there was a huge, for instance, HIV crisis in Iranian prisons. So public health advocates, people who are advocating for a different type of drug policy, ending of the war on drugs, decarceralizing things like, minor drug use. Those are different movements than the political prisoner movements. And to my mind, we have to find a way to start having them talk to each other. Because I think that they're sympathetic to each other in really important ways. That's where the framework of abolition is useful, even if it's not, the language is itself not indigenous to the Iranian context.
That was very insightful. I actually was conducting or started the interview and sort of kind of ended it, but we had to take that off so that you can watch a shorter version. The longer version, as MK shared, will be on statushour.com shortly. We'll be back with you in just a few seconds. Okay. Next, we are actually going to show an important section or video by Sinan Antoun, who is in charge of the Arabic section at ASI. And he will be sharing with us some of the content that is going to be or has been published on Jadaliya and elsewhere at ASI. So I'll let this speak for itself. In addition to that, a lot of Arabic content is now published as part of various reports at Tadween Publishing, including the Syria quarterly report, which chronicles. I didn't say Syria.
All the devices heard that.
So the Syria quarterly report on Tadween Publishing chronicles important development in Syria on a weekly basis since January 1, 2018. And we are publishing this material in both Arabic and English, as well as important articles written all over the world in Arabic and English, in addition to the developments on a weekly basis. So you can check that out at tadweenpublishing.com. For now, we'll go to Sinan Antoun, who will share with us a few words about the Arabic content. Assalamu alaikum.
Hello, everybody. We've been re energizing the Arabic section at Jadaliya in recent months. And highlights of what we've been publishing include selections from Native American poetry, chosen and translated into Arabic by Osama Esber, one of our editors, who also published an essay on protest poetry in the United States. I published an essay on rituals of violence and the history of lynching in this country. One of our regular contributors, Yazan El-Hajj, continues to publish essays providing new readings of the Epic of Gilgamesh. We also published translations of essays by James Baldwin and Sarah Ahmed, and an essay by Amiel Alkalai celebrating the life and legacy of the Iraqi Jewish writer Sham'un Ballas. We continue to publish writings from young authors in the Arab world. For example, an Iraqi journalist, Nabil Saleh, published an essay about Baghdad in the aftermath of the October Revolution. We also published an essay by Ataf Al-Attar on Palestinian political prisoners in Egypt in the previous century and in this one. And hopefully we'll continue to expand and enrich the material we publish on Jadaliyya. So check us out.
Great. Thank you so much to Sinan for providing that review. Just as a side note to any of our listeners who might be learning Arabic, such as myself, I find it really helpful to check out the Arabic section because we have many pieces that are written in Arabic and in English. So it's helpful to do a little bit of translation check. So just a fun little tidbit for people to keep in mind if you're in the process of learning Arabic. Great. Okay, so next up, we are going to talk to you about pedagogy and our most recent content on the topic of pedagogy. We are super grateful to have Makaram Al-Jamal, the managing editor of ASI's Middle East Studies Pedagogy Initiative, to have lent her time to give us a little bit of an overview on the great work coming out of MESPI. So let's check out what she has to say.
Hello everybody. We've been re-energizing the Arabic section at Jadaliyya.
This is just a note that this was not Makarim, just in case there was a confusion.
We just love Sinan so much that
Sinan.
we wanted to hear it again.
With the vast amount of resources available for Middle East studies, finding and incorporating nuanced materials into our education, both formal and informal, can be an overwhelming task. The Middle East Studies Pedagogy Initiative, or MESPI, takes on that difficult task of curation and material collection for educators and students of a variety of levels through 5 different initiatives. Our most recent peer-reviewed articles review bouquet focused on the topic of race in academic journal articles published from 1979 to 2019 in Middle East studies and related fields. The aforementioned Palestine, Israel, and Race article was part of this bouquet, and it accompanied 2 additional installments, Race in the Middle East and North Africa, and Race and the Middle East in the United States. A significant goal of this particular bouquet is to recognize the uneven terrain of this topic and its relative marginalization thus far in the mainstay of Middle East and North Africa studies. With a growing interest in anti-capitalist thought and politics, our special series on essential readings on the left offers a powerful contribution to the field. As mentioned earlier, we've already published The Left in Mandate Palestine by Musa Bouderi. In addition to Bouderi's piece, Joel Bynens contributed to this series with Marxism and the Left in Egypt, as did Iskander Sadegh Bourjedi, whose essential readings on Iranian socialism and communism inaugurated this series. In the coming months, we expect to release further installments of this series highlighting the Kurdish left and the left in Turkey. New Text Out Now, or Newton, provides authors and editors of new publications a space to discuss the arguments, methods, and challenges associated with writing, researching, publishing, and teaching their text. A recent Newton by Ali Abdulatif Ahmeda has stirred debate and interest on social media and in academic circles around his new book, Genocide in Libya, Shar, A Hidden Colonial History. Recently published in Libya too, Ahmeda's book challenges what he views as unacceptable silence around the Libyan genocide, which occurred at the hands of Italian fascists during their occupation of the country. Engaging Books is a monthly series featuring new and forthcoming books in the Middle East studies from publishers around the globe, keeping readers up to date on the latest trends in the MENA publishing world. Brill Publishers' selections of texts on Muslim minorities highlights the institutional, collective, and individual factors of Muslims' inclusion and exclusion in Germany, Eastern Europe, and elsewhere. MESPI's newest element is the secondary education module, which is in partnership with the Middle East Studies program at George Mason University and the Centers for Contemporary Arab Studies and Muslim Christian Understanding at Georgetown University. As education at the secondary level is sometimes the only instance in which American students are exposed to content on world regions and their cultures, this project supports raising the level of teaching and scholarship at the secondary level to reflect frameworks for teaching world history and cultures. We're grateful to have Susan Douglas, the Education Outreach Director with the Center for Contemporary Arab Studies, to tell us more about all the features and resources provided within the secondary education module. If any of these projects pique your interest, be sure to check out this episode's post or check out our website at mespi.org.
Great. Thank you so much. Now, let's see. There we go. Okay. So if you didn't already know, Jadalia has a number of special feature pages. One of these special feature pages is our Quick Thoughts page. The Quick Thoughts page is a space where researchers, scholars, experts can comment on ongoing events or recent events in a brief and incisive way to help our audience better understand in short form what might be going on or developing in the region.
We've already shared a few quick thoughts pieces earlier in this episode on Tuesday, and you can also find them in the episode's post, which will include all of the hyperlinks, all the links to everything that we have shared. If you would like to uh, visit a video or an article, or if you'd like to share with anybody, you can also find everything there. Um, but there's one more we wanted to share with you, which MK will do, and I will try to fix the issue, and I can give you the camera there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ahlan wa sahlan.
So we have recently had a really fantastic piece produced by Jadalia co-editor Lisa Hajar on executive excess. And she explains in this Quick Thoughts piece a right-wing view of presidential power termed the unitary executive theory. The theory advocates of the theory, contend that the president can do whatever they want because they are the president and because their office bestows this power upon them and them alone. This theory was conceived in the mid 1970s during the rise of the quote unquote new right. This persisted through the Bush administration, which I don't know about you, but I'm shocked. I'm shocked
I am
to
also
hear
shocked.
that Bush employed this theory. And Obama, too. Wow.
Mhm.
Everything is shocking, left to right. And of course, also being applied under the Trump administration. All of these administrations have made use of this interpretation of executive power. Next up, the topic of Turkey. So we have some cool things from Jadalia's Turkey page that we want to share with you.
In a piece titled "Challenge Accepted?" Systemic erasures in femicide narratives from Turkey, Ronay Bakan and Sida Saluk examined the challenge accepted hashtag campaign's relationship to the contemporaneous Turkish black and white photo hashtag challenge. That is black and white photo with dashes, hashtag challenge, drawing attention to femicides in Turkey and the Turkish government's attempted withdrawal from the Istanbul Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women. Organized in response to the killing of Pinar Gultekin, a Kurdish citizen of Turkey who was murdered by her ex boyfriend after being denied police protection. The authors explore how the Turkish campaign erased her Kurdish identity in ways that mirror Turkish state violence against Kurdish women.
Now, also on the topic of Turkey, you may have heard some wild analysis of Turkey's move to revert the Hagia Sophia into a mosque. Thankfully, Spiros Sophos' piece titled What is in a Place, Hagia Sophia in the Effective Topography of Populism in Turkey offers a more grounded analysis in which they argue that Turkey's President Erdogan used the move as a diversionary tactic to shift attention from the ontological insecurity of economic and political crises to the tried and true symbolism of defending a purportedly embattled Turkish sovereignty. Sophos argues that the reconversion is emblematic of Erdogan's authoritarian populism, offering the effective and fleeting experience of symbolic sovereignty in place of the substantive popular sovereignty repressed by his system of one man rule.
For more on Turkey, check out this episode's post for a Newton by Saleh Khan Ashiksoz.
That was perfect.
Was it?
It was.
Which one? I said three.
Everything.
Ashik AC with a squiggle at the bottom, and then an I, K S O with like two eyes up top, not as in two dots, and then a Z. For more on Turkey, check out this episode post for a Newton by Saleh Khan Ashik Shows. titled Sacrificial Limbs, Masculinity, Disability, and Political Violence in Turkey.
Hey, Bassam, guess what? Guess what?
What?
It's that time of year again. It's time for internship
Yes.
applications. So if you want to be part of this chaotic good of a team, we highly encourage you to apply for an internship with ASI. You can learn more about these internships and actually submit an application at arabstudiesinstitute.org. But we're going to play for you a brief clip that shares with you the different positions that are available. See if something catches your interest. We'd love to have you join us.
We're gonna come back to that
Okay,
after the yeah.
we'll come back to that.
Absolutely.
Great.
Because there is an issue with with this particular format, so we will fix it and then we'll
Yeah,
play it
haram.
after the
Okay.
next.
Okay.
All right.
So we'll move on.
All right. Um, the last theme is pedagogy, kind of part two. MESP's newest element is our secondary education module, which is in partnership with the Middle East Studies program at George Mason University and the Center for Contemporary Arab Studies and Muslim Christian Understanding the Centers for Contemporary Arab Studies and Muslim Christian Understanding at Georgetown University. As education at the secondary level is sometimes the only instance in which American students are exposed to content on world religions and their cultures, this project supports raising the level of teaching and scholarship at the secondary level to reflect current frameworks for teaching world history and cultures. We are very happy to have Susan Douglas, the Education and Outreach Director with the Center for Contemporary Arab Studies and MESP's Secondary Education Module Editor, to tell us more about all the features and resources provided by the Secondary Education Module. And here we go.
The module offers 4 main sections that highlight quality coverage of essential topics and effective pedagogy. The first is the resource guide, a curated list of teaching resources in 6 common categories or topics. And as you can see above, you can download the entire guide. Next is a set of curriculum units, lesson plans, and even syllabi that are free and ready to download and adapt to individual classroom settings. An amazing feature is a spreadsheet that tracks mandated content on the Middle East and North Africa in all state and national academic standards. It's a great tool for researchers in curriculum and textbooks and those seeking to improve coverage of the region by engaging public discourse in regular standards revision cycles. Finally is the section Critical Readings for Educators and engaging important readings on historical background, issues of pedagogical framing and content that support teachers' awareness of larger issues within which they teach. These include MESPI scholarship of interest to secondary educators seeking to keep current on complex scholarly debates, books, and resources. We will be adding new resources to the secondary education module regularly, so make it a regular browsing stop when you visit MESPI. Thank you.
So yeah, that's great. I'm looking forward to that. Not that I teach secondary education, but I can still look forward to it because it's going to have so many awesome resources for anyone who's interested in the region, really, at all, right?
Yes, and
So-
apologies for the mix-up with the call for interns. We're going to show it right now.
Other positions include audiovisual editors with Status Al Wada podcast. We're also looking for audiovisual producers specifically for this show. Um, So apologies, we didn't have sound there, but we hope that you did see something that maybe caught your eye. We are a very fun team, not to hype us up, but I will hype us up because
Yeah, go ahead.
this is, look at, I won't, because it's
Corona.
Corona, so look at this friendship. Lasts a lifetime. Come join us. You won't regret it. Yeah. So please.
Yes, the internship program, it's not really an internship program. It's basically a way to work with younger, perhaps, I mean, although we have all sorts of ages, but usually younger folks who would like to be introduced to how knowledge production and knowledge consumption works in the field of Middle East studies. And the people that we actually recruit are very much like the team members we have. As people know, ASI is mostly volunteer based. So it's not like everybody's making salaries and then there's an internship, which is slave labor. It's actually very much a situation where everybody is the same. If you stay for a long time, you're doing particular chores or particular duties or particular type of tasks that have a budget line, then you have a stipend. But most interns, we call them researchers internally, actually are immediately team members and immediately become part owners of the project, which is why so many people stay on board even after the internship ends. So we have accumulated literally more than 1,000 people in the past 28 years working with us. And now sometimes we approach 200 people at any point, or 180 or 150 people at any point working with ASI worldwide. So it's actually a great place to work where you can find yourself. It's safe. It's a safe space, non-hierarchical, and allows you to do whatever you want to do, provided that you're bringing something that uh, there is a consensus on it within the team, that it will actually bring some sort of a new knowledge, positive results, or anything of the sort. So please join us, or let your students, your friends, know that this is an opportunity on a rolling basis at ASI.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, Bassam. And as we mentioned earlier, you can apply for these positions at arabstudiesinstitute.org. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email us at info@arabstudiesinstitute.org. And with that, plea for you to come and join us, because we would love, the more the merrier. We will sign off for today. So thank you so much to all who joined us. I'm MK Smith, reporting from Washington, D.C.
And my name is Bassam Haddad, signing off here. And you have been awesome. We could tell from the first part on Tuesday, there's been a huge a barrage of support and encouragement and praise. So thank you all very much. And we'll see you next month.
See you next month.
Salam.